and welcome our panel. And we probably can go around if you can quickly introduce yourself just in a few words, your relationship to CIC, of course, but also what your expertise is in real life, and just an idea of what sessions you were attending, and we can go into the details of that after the fact. But right now, maybe just mention which sessions you attended. So maybe we can just go down. Ken, you wanna start us?
Sure. Am I muted? No, I'm now muted. Got it. Okay. Hi, I'm Kian Lee, and I'm on the board of the CIC, and I'm also Vice President and Principal Associate at Community Science. My work really centers around research and evaluation, specifically how to do research and evaluation in service of racial equity. And I moderated the community engagement session.
Maybe just go to the next one. Just turn on your microphone and everybody can see that you are ready to speak. Flo?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Florence Gutierrez. I work for the Annie Casey Foundation. I'm a senior associate there, leading the Kids Count work. So most of my work really focuses on making sure that the data that we collect, the research that we do, is really put into action in order to improve outcomes for kids at the national levels and within states. It's a pleasure to be here.
I can go next. My name is Jennifer Temmer, and I'm an associate with the International Institute for Sustainable Development, and I'm also a board member at the CIC, and was the chairperson for the awards committee. So hopefully you got to see the awards committee ceremony earlier today. I had the pleasure of getting to see all of the presentations this week. There was some amazing topics covered, but I also had the pleasure of moderating the resiliency track, and so I'll be probably focusing most of my comments around that one today.
Lyle Ray, excuse me, a past president of CIC. I forgot the right number of pasts in there. Chair of the conference committee, where Chantel and the committee did all the work, but we got a lot done. 3 indicator projects, Ventura County Community Alliance, which is about 800,000 people just northwest of Los Angeles. Before that, the Minnesota Milestones Project, a statewide indicator project, and then most recently Progress Points here in Metro Hartford, Connecticut, with about 1 million people. I got about a third of the things in. I've been fighting with software all day today, but that's another story. I found the keynote, Angela Blackwell's keynote, very compelling and very interesting, and there were a number of other presentations that were very, very good as well. But that was the one that I think struck the right note to tee off the conference. So I'll leave it there.
Nancy, are you speaking? You're on mute.
That's interesting. I thought I had unmuted. I'm Nancy Watson. I have worked for Engage Nova Scotia, a not-for-profit organization in Nova Scotia, as well as the province of Nova Scotia, and particularly around something called the Nova Scotia Quality of Life Initiative, which is focused on using research in conjunction with communities, governments, businesses, the academia and nonprofit sector, kind of a large social science experiment about change.
Great, and I'm Frank Rizzi. I'm currently on the board and serving as president. During the day, I'm at the Central New York Community Foundation, where I'm vice president for the grant-making department, and I'm also an associate professor of sociology at Lemoyne College. And I found the conference to be thrilling. I found I was in all the sessions, although I did have some technology issues that I got blocked out and a few interruptions. But I found things ranging from new website data sources that I could go to, which got me excited, to tools, new tools that we could apply in our community, to some new ways to apply tools we were already using. So quite excited about this conference, and also some new theoretical framework that'll help us in our local community. So very excited.
Thank you all. Oh, I see Luis was able to come in, so I don't want to put him right on the spot before he even has a chance to show himself. But maybe we can go to the next question. And this is actually the same question that I asked the panelists in the previous session on data tools, is unless he's right there and ready to go. Hi, Luis.
Hi, everyone.
So I ask everybody to quickly introduce themselves, their affiliation to CIC, what they do in real life, and what sessions they were able to attend and maybe able to comment on later.
Oh, yes, for sure. Well, first of all, I want to praise Chantal and Jennifer for, all the work behind the scenes, coordinating all this virtual conference. I was just emailing one of you just about, I cannot get into the platform, and I really appreciate your efforts to both of you. So thank you for that. Yeah, my name is Luis Esteves. I'm a professor at St. Cloud State University in Minnesota. I'm an urban planner for education. I've been a practitioner, and now I'm in the academia as a social scientist. I use different hats in my role. I'm a professor. I do research because I believe on action, and I will talk about that later on. I'm a planning commissioner for the city where I live, so I'm an elected official as well. So I'm part of a nonprofit organization, and I'm part of the board of CIC. So I try to see or to work through all the spectrum of activities that link. As Nancy Watson made a question in one of the previous sessions about how we can make real the connection between data, indicators, and positive change. That's what always draw me to do something beyond. I love data. If I'm sleeping at a conference and someone says data, I'm like, oh, tell me about the methodology, how you collected that. I wake up instantly. But I'm really worried about that next step. So anyway, that's who I am. And yeah, I attended different sessions, some almost full time and some other just part of it. Resilience, for instance, place-based founders. I was at that one as well. The latest ones about data tools. Yesterday is with David Abraham, and we run the one about quality of life indicators. So anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Louis. I'm glad you could make it. So the reason I'm actually asked that question of all of you is not only because we want everybody to know you, particularly because of your role on the CIC board, but also because that also gives a perspective on the difference of where you're coming from, your different perspectives as you're looking at the conference. And I think we want to highlight that, we have academia, we have indicator projects, we have some of you working more in government, more in nonprofit and whatnot. So that makes you, and foundations, community foundations and large international foundations. So that makes your perspective as you will be commenting on what you saw and heard and what you view as new trends in throughout the conference, that much more valuable and hopefully applicable to all the breadth of the audience that we have here. So maybe for the first question to all of you is what new ideas, perspective, approach, tool, is there anything that you heard that you think that you really want to highlight, and this is something that you may take back to your own work, or something that you just want to make sure that nobody else missed when you heard that? And again, just turn your microphone on, and as we see the green microphone on, we'll just know that you are ready to speak. Anybody?
Don't everyone go first.
I'll go. So for me, with the community engagement session, I found it really refreshing, and it was great to see Rosa Gonzalez had a framework for community engagement that was built on the, I think, International for Association for Public Participation, IAP2, and also the Einstein's letter of citizen engagement, that she brought the two together and created a very comprehensive framework that looked at racial equity or inequity and sort of where social injustice comes in through that lens, and actually expanded the framework from marginalization all the way to deferred power and the community having power. And I just thought it was a really great comprehensive framework to not only frame our session, but to really make us think about, when we're talking about community and we're talking about engagement, what do those two things specifically mean and who are they referring to?
Yeah, and my comment my comment was connected to that. I facilitated the child and family tract, and I would say that the majority of the folks who presented in that tract really brought in the importance of engaging the impacted community. The idea that we have to bring in not only the community, but if it's an index of child well-being or youth, that we need to bring in the youth to help with the development of not only the questions, but of the development of the survey, the collection of the data, just thinking about different ways that we could actually engage youth and engage the community in the actual process, which is something that many of us have been thinking about, but it's something that is very hard to do well. So I think it just made the point that it is important. And like Bijan from Citizens Committee of Children of New York also talked about innovative ways such as data walks, theater enactments, role playing, just different ways to really engage folks, and to keep in mind that many times those voices that we often leave out, we leave them out because they have obstacles to actually engaging. So just thinking about those obstacles, be it time, transportation, family obligations, lack of rapport that they might have with the organization, and start tackling those so that we can really make authentic engagement and connection. So I thought that was really important and a key theme throughout the whole child and family tract.
Maybe I could jump in. I can't see anybody, so I hope I'm not stepping on anybody's lines. I would agree with that. I think there was a strong theme of enhanced, meaningful engagement of those affected in a variety of aspects of the program, and that was very good. But I guess I would just sort of make a few observations that relate to maybe new statements of things. I thought Angela Glover-Blackwell's point about the underlying ideologies when we deal with a problem we need to be aware of, I think that's worth restating, but her point about the justification narrative and the hierarchy of human value, and her citation of William Julius Wilson. But that whole issue of making ideologies related to challenges we're facing explicit. And the other thing I think she said that would be appropriate for carving in stone is that we need a results-based North Star. I thought that was, as a sort of outcomes guy, that's that's a great phrase. I wish I'd invented it. So the ideology was the first thing. The second one, I think, is throughout a number of the presentations, and I managed to get to a number of them on recording, were two kinds of frameworks, content frameworks and software frameworks. The content frameworks, like the SDGs and a few others, I think basically could potentially save us from reinventing the wheel all the time. Even though you need custom content to particular communities, starting with a 17-goal framework and then picking and choosing is better than starting from scratch. And I've been around the tree on starting from scratch. So the second part of that framework. And then the third point was the PEG software presentation, which is new to many people, I think, and that was a relatively low-cost, customizable, simple-to-use software framework for using indicator systems. And I think so. I guess ideology is the first point. The second one was content and software frameworks, and I think the other aspect is that's I guess a rising trend is the whole ease and sophistication of data visualizations. And we had a presentation this afternoon on Tableau, and I think that whole visualization system of ever easier to use and less expensive visualizations that allow you to break out and disaggregate by race or income or whatever and show things geographically, I think is very, very critical. So those are the three observations: the ideology, the frameworks, and then the data visualizations.
Nancy, are you
Sure.
green? Or should I? Okay.
The thing that stood out for me most powerfully, and Angela Blackwell caught it at the beginning of the session, and it was reiterated by a number of the presenters as the days proceeded, was the degree to which we are in a particular powerful and latent with potential time right now, latent with potential and also risk, and that this is something that is something that I think historically is a tremendous privilege and opportunity for us. And the question she raised was, what is the role of data in a time ripe for revolution? And that time is ripe for revolution like never before. That notion, as Lyle said, of the narrative hierarchy of human value, hadn't heard it expressed that way. But clearly we see it, we reject it, and it's now up to us to do the work to get rid of it. But she was so clear about the fact that data can support vision, it can win over sympathetic critics, and it can marginalize those who refuse to see. And then Rhonda Phillips at the end summed up in the same way by saying, if this isn't the time for us to take these tools and put them to use and leverage them for real good, then when is? So that overall call for the potential of our field in a incredible time, that sense of urgency and hope is what stood out for me.
Thank you. I think I'm the last green who hasn't gone. I would echo many of the comments made earlier, but what could I add that wouldn't be a repeat? I guess something new that I've heard, especially in this time of twin challenges of COVID and long-standing racial inequities, is not just the importance of engagement, which I think we hit really solidly here. We had some great examples of engagement and community engagement in the creation and running of community indicators, but also what I think is kind of new is more of a involvement in the production of the data. I heard quotes like, grassroots community-led research is what really leads to change. The importance of narrative, getting people's narrative there, connecting not just with picking indicators, but also that equity lens of having the voice come through. So I heard, something that I think more recent years of community indicator research, as it moves closer to connecting with program management and program evaluation, the CIPM connection is this movement that connects the larger North Star that Angela Glover Blackwell pointed out, which is critical, indispensable. But also, as we delve deeper into moving that needle, which was another big theme, right? Data to change, right? Making that progress. The importance of not just having community engagement, but also community voice in the data. So that, where is the space for qualitative data? And so often, historically in academia at least, the qualitative and the quantitative are pitted against one another. But I do think that with some of the new ideas that I've heard here, we're seeing more of a connection of those two, and that they both can have a place in really informing each other. And we're seeing some of the ways that can happen with the inclusion of narrative, the inclusion of focus groups, the connecting with people for human-centered design approach around indicators that have identified them as people who are knowledgeable of what's going on and ready to share their experiences. So I think in addition to the things that were added earlier in terms of new ideas and trends, that's something that I heard bubbling through in multiple presentations, and that's quite encouraging because we can't just continue to do things the way we have done them, and the lack of voice or the exclusion of voice has been something that has been something that's dogged our communities, our civilizations for some time. So I'll pause there.
Yeah, I would add, I guess, that for me, some of the new ideas that really occurred. I mean, in general, though, the resiliency track, I think, is something that's was very new for us this year, and it's given us an ability to be able to talk about in the environment and climate and the social aspects of that, and really kind of get into the nuts and bolts about what resiliency actually means. And I think that in Annika's presentation, she really got to the point in that when we talk about resilience, as Nancy and Kian both said, we have to determine the who, the what, and the why. So who is it impacting? What's being impacted? And what kind of programs and policies are we implementing, and why are we implementing them? So those three things were very, very, very important. And I think that just generally resiliency, it's a really, really important underpinning for community indicator systems because it takes into consideration that systems approach. And the systems approach is something that we've been talking about across, I think, all of the different tracks this whole week. How it considers that the interconnected nature between the environment and the social and the economic and health and other elements of our society. So community indicator systems, they help to highlight those connections. And that piece of it is really, really key, I think. So even though we've been doing this for a very, very long time, and we've been sort of highlighting those interconnected pieces, we have a new framework to be able to talk about it now. The other piece that I found was really inspiring to me, and something that I really haven't heard very much in previous conferences, is around the way that projects are connecting social vulnerability to environmental data and environmental forecasts. So things like urban heat islands and flooding data, so that they can help to prevent impact and sort of make it adapt and prepare for future events. So we heard those presentations both from the Austin Area Sustainability Indicators. So Patrick Bixler and Jessica Jones, they gave a fantastic presentation around that, as well as Megan Grable from the Island Institute, when she was speaking about sea level rise in Vinyl Haven, Maine. And then finally, also Susan Maloney from RMIT in Australia gave us a wonderful presentation about how they are working with local governments to make adaptation plans.
Thank you. Luis, I don't think we've heard from you. And then after that, we definitely want David to introduce himself very briefly and say a few words as we are talking about the new ideas, topic, issues that you've heard through the sessions that you were attending over the course of this conference. Luis, do you want to go?
Yes. Well, let's see. I agree with what most of the panelists have said already about some new things. Yeah, I'm still surprised about the rich and abundance of data and people working in different areas, either internationally, locally, looking at different aspects, even through things about resilience. And I think that's the thing that still surprised me. We live in a time, as Nancy was saying, where we have an opportunity with all available data compared to decades ago in our hands. It's incredible. I think there is no place where you could look at around and find that has some type of curated data available. So yeah, that's the thing I could say, because I wouldn't be just emphasizing what others said already about new things.
Thank you. David, can you turn your microphone on?
Hi, everyone. I'm David Abraham, treasurer for the organization, and I manage the Houston Sustainability Indicators program at Rice University. I've been doing that for the last 10 years, and we are impacted. Okay, we're impacted by COVID, and we're also impacted by the new Black Lives movement going on in the world. And at this point, we are very interested we are in the middle of retooling our focus on a couple of different perspectives. As you heard, some of you might have heard from our sister academic organization in Austin, the Austin Sustainability Indicators. They are also retooling with regards to moving the program from one department to another department. We are interested in retooling our program to integrate more of the new SDGs, which is more of a comprehensive look at things with regards to the different types of indicators. And because of the Black Lives movement, we are absolutely having equity as our foundational focus. And so as I was listening to the sessions, I was specifically listening for the session I moderated was on the SDGs. However, I was listening for the current events and the current stream of things in everybody's presentation, trying to understand whether folks were simply presenting business as usual, or whether I could hear changes, and specifically whether I could hear changes with regards to COVID and the Black Lives movement. To close, just because we have other areas that we'd like to discuss as well. A very small point that came up in one of my sessions was this sense of recognition that when we talk about data-driven decision making, and everybody's calling for that as a need, possibly to make sure that decisions are being made from a more reliable perspective and objective perspective. That being the case, most grassroots stakeholders, and also even above grassroots stakeholders, major organizations, still require substantive experts to help with moving from data to action. Many of us talk about policy. Quite frankly, the science behind policy today is more of an art. And so, most people would agree that decision making today is not very scientific. So when we talk about data-driven decision making, we also have to come to terms, honestly, with what that means. And it's not going to be, well, the data says we need to improve by 20% if we want to be on par with everybody else. And so we're going to do this program to make sure that we get to the 20%. No. In all honesty, what that means is recognizing that we have a deficit and doing our best to come up with programs to support the local communities that we work with, and making sure that we do our evaluations to ensure that we have increases. And the last thing I wanted to say is, to accomplish that, there is a major role in 2020 for community indicators programs and you guys as leaders of those programs. You're, for the most part, apolitical organizations, as in you're not elected officials or civil staff, and you're not representatives of large business. You're third sector organizations for the most part, whether you're a nonprofit or at a university. And so, yes, you may have your own internal reporting responsibilities, but you have more leeway to get out there and honestly be able to impact programs and actions to improve sustainable development. And so I wanted to share that small comment with you guys.
Thank you, David. Flo, are you able to join? Do you have sound? If not, video? So while we're trying to figure that out, I did want to underscore Jennifer's point about environmental issues. And to me, actually, I have been going to a lot of presentations from different indicator projects, from different people trying to build indicator projects who are working on that. And I've been fairly surprised over the years to see that environmental issues, in most of it, what is probably one of the most urgent issues of our times, putting aside COVID-19 and racial inequities, which are obviously incredibly important as well. But in terms of the survival of the planet, we are talking about climate change. But I've seen that less and less prominent in indicator projects. Definitely in the US, a little bit more outside of the US. So I was happy to see that we were able throughout the conference to not only mention those urgent issues like COVID-19 and racial inequities, but also keep a little bit of a focus on climate change and other environmental issues, which are chronic issues that are only going to get worse and affect health, affect well-being, affect social and economic issues, and should definitely be part of a systemic approach to looking at communities. So maybe moving on to the next question, and this is similar to the question I just asked the previous panel on data tools, is what from your, sitting through all those hours of presentations, did you catch any areas where you could build on data gaps, knowledge gaps, science gaps, anything that if you had all the options in the world, all the resources in the world, this would be the first thing that you'd be investing in to be doing research in that area.
I think.
Go ahead.
I think Jennifer was talking when things start happening, but I can talk if. Okay, perfect. Yeah,
go ahead. I'll go after you.
The point too about gaps and things like that. Nancy Watson was reading my thoughts when she asked this question in Rhonda's panel about how effective we have been in translating good data into change. And Rhonda also took my thoughts about when the rubber meets the road. I'm glad that I saw many panelists and people that is engaged in community indicators, but either have a planning background, either academic or professional experience, and that's fantastic, because usually that's the role of planners. And in planning, there is a problem about, urban planning is about going and making these nice, beautiful plans and documents, and there is always this dilemma about ending on the shelves of local government. We do all this community engagement, all this visioning process, and all of these things and goals and objectives, but end up on the shelf and nothing changes. Again, where the rubber meets the road, how to make that connection to me is where we have. I will say not the gap, because there are examples. For instance, I was listening to Sarah Troff from Link about what they are doing for the Equity Atlas in the Bay Area. they are advocating for evictions and rental things. So there is some movement there. So I think there are examples. But I was thinking about the average American metro area, not talking about the Seattle's or the San Francisco's or even the Minneapolis, where we got rid of single-family residential housing, in terms of zoning. Someone put a phrase, an African-American lawyer I heard some time ago, where he said, well, what Jim Crow laws were doing decades ago, geography is doing now. So yeah, we have foundations giving money to organizations or universities, nonprofits, to come up with indicators for their communities in terms of equity or any other topic, and that's fantastic. But how can we able to see that doesn't end up being just a nice dashboard or a nice report? Because we see everyone talking about this fantastic work, and it's fantastic. But how that translated into action? And I think that reminds me from like was referring to Angela about talking activism. I'm not sure how many of us remember Jane Jacobs, The Death and Life of American Cities.
Yep.
For those who are planners, we had to read that book. I met Jane Jacobs just before passing away in 2016 in Toronto, for instance. She wasn't even a planner. And every planner has to read her book. She was an activist, going against Robert Moses and having all this and stories together with that evidence of how really we are making, as Nancy was asking, effective that data making change. That's where I see the gap and where we need to think beyond just beautiful dashboards and reports in terms of data.
So my comment was very connected to what Luis just said, that and there's all this great work happening. There's all this data being collected, all these studies being done. A lot of it's being used to improve service delivery. And all I kept thinking was, if it's working in the small community, how can we take what is learned from those communities and actually scale it, or use it to inform policy or advocacy, or to produce some level of change that's broader than just that small little community. And it's the taking data and, like you were saying, making it actionable, giving the data to community and connecting that data with advocacy training so that they can go and use it to improve outcomes for themselves and their community and for the larger community at large. I feel like there's a lot more work to be done in that space by the sector just in general.
And I guess I would take it even further than that and say, beyond advocacy, what is the potential of research to actually act as a tool of inquiry to identify new possible strategies where, in situations where pervasive problems have languished. It seems to me we do a level of analysis on a lot of research. I'm particularly interested, as you know, in quality of life research, so it has a very broad spectrum. To me, what is fascinating should be how those domains interact with each other. And then add the demographics, and then start really going deep And what are the connections that you can find that are unexpected? And based on that, and if you have a group of people that includes community and includes all of the other relevant actors in a community, and they use that as an opportunity to create prototypes for interventions that then work their way up to the attention of governments as policy options. Is that getting closer to the potential of research to actually fulfill its what it can do? In particular, if, as we did, you're asking people to participate in research in a qualitative way, you're inherently asking them to be involved in creating change, and you have to close that loop. You can't just take the information. You have to involve them in making it mean something. And it seems to me that there's a big gap in expertise between the researchers and the community activists on the ground in being able to interpret that data deeply enough and translate that in working with community through engagement into notions of prototypes, identifying priorities, and then elevating it to a policy level. It seems to me like it's a whole school of thought and a discipline that just hasn't been developed.
Anyone else? Looked like we lost a few people. I was trying to get them back in, and I know Jennifer is working furiously behind the screen as well. But Frank, did you have a chance? I'm sorry, I lost track of who was actually speaking.
Yeah, I was out and then back in again. Forgive me if I'm repeating, but in terms of gaps in knowledge, another thing that had come up, I know it came up in David's talk and others, was the way that sustainable development goals and others had really have the opportunity for efficiency, and in that you don't have to reinvent the wheel, you don't have to reselect things that you'll measure. But one of the problems is we don't necessarily have easy to access local data or ways to measure those things. So that's still something that is really sort of a gap in knowledge. And some of the tools that we're developing are great potentially repositories for that. But there also, there remains to be, some work to be done in that area, particularly as we have a trend that I've noticed across presentations is the push toward having more localized and quicker data that is more responsive. For instance, disabilities, things that aren't really collected that need to be collected in order to respond to community needs that have been voiced from residents. That's sort of a gap in knowledge that I thought was something that we really could develop more as we go forward. But this sense of, what's the field that does this? Is it public administration? Is it, or is it something yet to be developed? That I agree. That's an area for growth. So again, I was off for a little bit and I missed a little bit.
So I'd like to jump in and complement that position that Frank raised. And I think COVID-19 and its impact on specific people has highlighted this issue with the disparity that most people touched on, the disparity between computer scientists and grassroots stakeholders and indicator projects like ourselves. Where was the data? Where is the data, right? The reliable data coming out here for COVID and its impact on specific populations is coming out at the county level, and in most cases no lower than the zip code level. And we know that zip codes are not reliable proxies for communities. Zip codes are meant for postal service workers to be able to efficiently deliver mail. And so within a zip code, you can have several different communities, and you can have communities that stretch across zip codes. So the general public, and in many cases, elected officials, do not have the ability to harness local level data, and specifically local level on-demand data. And so, there's a lot of talk about the smart city, and there's a lot of talk about how cities, yes, recognize they need to be smart. So what are cities doing? They're hiring a bunch of computer scientists, right? But there is no strong relationship between the computer scientists and the communities, and again, organizations like ours that are in that gap and could fulfill that role of intelligence and making sure that analytics actually speak to the geographic levels of concern and issues. And so I'll give you an example. So within the planning academia discussions that happened, somebody published a report. Somebody published an analysis using state level data and then down to county level data to compare different urban areas. And it was published in a major journal. And many of us, question the methodology with regards to looking at an urban area according to a county boundary, which, as we know, counties have several cities inside of them. And we know in the USA in 2020, there are people who live in the suburbs and refuse to want to live in the urban area because they're culturally different and they prefer to live in the suburbs. And then the opposite is true as well. People who live in the urban area do so because their lifestyle practices are very different than suburban communities. And so doing an analysis at that level by major professors and researchers published in major journals is quite frankly not reliable data. So I just said that to say that with all of the funding that has gone into the smart city, we have not been able to use, we have not been able to be as efficient as China is with regards to getting real-time data. And so we have political obstacles, but primarily we have lack of truly interdisciplinary, I think, research and research practices happening in our country. And that's something that hopefully we can continue the discussion also as an organization to find ways in which we can help our member organizations across the world to be able to step in and maybe lend some ear with.
Thank you, David. Anybody else wants to add something to that? So we actually have a few minutes left, and maybe I would just go around, and if you can, in a minute each, maybe closing thoughts on the conference. Just put everything that you've been thinking about, you've been talking about up to now, together in one very small package, and please, go for it.
Well, let me go first and fast, Chantal. And addressing your last point for the panel about what's the role of CIC. Mm-hmm. And I think that after all this conversation and looking at all these gaps and the things that everyone has mentioned, I think CIC has a role that we can play there. We can be that organization that, gathers the people who can show that some things work and connect with those who want to know about it. I think CIC can have that important role in those gaps. Not because we are going to be doing research by ourselves as an organization, but I think we have the leverage to connect with many people around the country and the world that is doing things that could start filling these gaps.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Yeah, and I agree. I think that we have a big role to play in translating the research, in educating researchers and community indicator projects on how to effectively translate that research so that it can be used by communities in order to produce change where they live. And just really think about how we can take the work that everybody's doing at the community level to inform policy and practice to produce that greater level of change.
And I would add on to Flo and Luis and talking about a little bit about the place-based funders track, which I helped to put together. That's a place where we saw a lot of action being taken. And so many of the projects, we start with the data and then yearn for the action. Oftentimes it's not always the case, but these are groups that are poised for action, but often we don't have time to digest the data. So as we think of audiences for packaging, it struck me that this is a ripe group, which is ready to and desiring to, to be data driven. Their day-to-day work is putting funding into action, and that often is grassroots groups. That often is government policy change. It includes advocacy. So I do think that that's a potential growth area as we think of audiences that will convert quickly their data to action. Is really articulating this work to those audiences. So
I don't know can you hear me or not?
Yes.
Okay, I always have to check. I seem to be reverbing. I'll try not to. Just to highlight one thing at the end, the Sundance Foundation presentation I found really compelling because it had a very critical topic, which is increasing income for low-income youth. It did evidence-based work. It had a very good logic model. It had a very wise kind of phasing. It had a whole variety of things. So I think one of the things I might want to highlight are approaches that sort of go from data to final delivery with engagement of the people involved and actually get results and get it done on a significant problem. And I think that package was, I don't know if it was unique in the whole conference, but it was certainly one that, if you look at it closely enough, they really, as I say, hit the nail on the head of the topic, the methodology, the data, the engagement of the youth, and something will actually make a real difference in where we sit. So I think that was sort of a home run. It was kind of quiet, but I think one of those things that ticked a lot of the boxes in terms of dealing with youth at risk, and going all the way through to getting the job. So just wanted to give them a kudo for that.
And I would concur with obviously everything that has gone before. And just to add another note, I would say that if the CIC's role is, this is like fractals. If we are a connector, if research is a connector, if we play a role in an ecosystem, etc., I think my suggestion is that based on my experience with this conference and this format, as imperfect as it may have been, I have found this approach a better way to do that than the traditional conference approach. There's something about being able to relax into and be thoughtful and digitally create the connections to additional information, people, websites, hear all of the presentations, etc. I would say that facilitates us playing that kind of role. And, also because there are perhaps not many more options in the world, going forward when we're going to be stuck with these tools. I think there are ways for us, whatever our new, whatever our modified role is, for us to optimize these tools to our benefit.
Anyone else? If not, we will close the conference then with major thanks to all of you, to all of the participants, to all the presenters. We had a very exceptional experience over those last few days. We did get a chance. I realized that this is not an in-person conference, and it's very different. I get a chance to talk to many of you, sometimes not in the best of circumstances, just trying to help you with a technical issue, but nevertheless, I get a chance to talk to many of you. So I did appreciate that opportunity. I do want to quickly remind you that, and I didn't check to see whether we have met our number or not, but there is an opportunity to enter for a free book, our newly published best case scenarios for community indicators, quality of life community indicators book. So if you haven't entered yet, make sure you do that. Also remind you that all of those presentations, all of the material will be online for a full 2 months with your registration. So you will have plenty of opportunities to listen to those again or for the first time. And please comment and whatnot. We will do our best to upload individual handouts and PowerPoints as well. It may take a little bit of time to do that, but come back to the website over the next 2 months, and you should be able to access all of that. So with that, thank you all. Have a fantastic weekend, and we'll see you many times in between, but definitely at the next CIC Impact Summits. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.